Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Darla back here again to do Is That Any Way to Treat Me? Today what we're going to look at is non-professional treatment approaches that you may encounter when you get out of here. And, got to start my timer. And sometimes as you're in here. I know probably not right now because with this whole COVID thing, we have a lot less programs than we used to, and for that I apologize. But hopefully I'll start to see some of you again soon. It'll be in a different format, but we will do what we have to do. So when we talk about non-professional, and I didn't forget about the breathing, I just want to make sure I get through all this, so I'm going to ask you, please, 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 do your 5 deep breaths on your own. For me, would you do that? Okay. Non-professional programs that can be of help. The first one we're going to talk about are the 12-step programs. The reason I'm starting with these, and we'll go pretty in-depth into this, is because this is something that most people have heard of and a lot of people make use of. A couple reasons why they make use of it. One, 12-step programs are available for free. There's a voluntary contribution. They're self-supporting, but it's through voluntary contribution. So if you don't have a dime, you don't pay a dime, right? But they are, free services. They are all over the place. There's over 100,000 meetings across the world. And you know what? I'm going to guess that that's gone up quite a bit, and I'll tell you why in a minute. More than, I think it's 2 million members worldwide, and it might even be more than that right now. So this is a huge resource. It's available, even in small towns. You can find meetings, large cities. And now, one thing that COVID has done is make a lot of these meetings, because people can't meet in person. And there used to be phone meetings, and there used to be email meetings, we could email notes back and forth to people or whatever, chat room kind of meetings. But now what's really exploded as a result of COVID are these digital platform meetings. So lots of all kinds of meetings, including 12-step and other recovery meetings, are going on, especially Zoom is the most popular one, but some of them do, what's it called, Microsoft Teams and all that. Skype kind of lost favor, I don't know when that disappeared. But so a lot of these are now digital, and that makes them even more accessible for a lot of people because, you can tune in, like say you only have a lunch hour and there's no meeting close to you, or you couldn't get to it in the time frame, but you can join a lunch meeting where you can get in there, or late at night, or early in the morning, or, all those, when your kids, if they ever go back to school, are at school. So there's all these different kinds of things, and you can check in, and it's not just your meeting. You're not restricted to what meetings are in my geographical zone. You can join a meeting in New York, or you could join a meeting in Paris if you wanted to. Yeah, hopefully you speak French, right? That happens. So that's, I think that they're going to expand even more. There is something to be said for that personal touch. So certainly if you can get to meetings, get to groups, do them personally. I would much rather be with you in the group in the jail because we get to interact and all that. I would love if we could have Zoom meetings in the jail, but the security issues are just beyond the technology that we are given. So 12-step programs, you might think of things like AA, Narcotics Anonymous, Crystal Meth Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Heroin Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Sex Addicts Anonymous. There's pretty much an anonymous meeting for almost everything. And then there's meetings for friends and family of the addicts. So there's Al-Anon for people where alcohol has been an issue, adult children of alcoholics where people grew up in a home where there's addictions, Codependence Anonymous, meetings for partners of sex addicts. So there's usually, for any group, there's usually a group that deals with that. Now, the most famous and by far the most attended is Alcoholics Anonymous because it's been around for so long. Can you go to Alcoholics Anonymous if alcohol is not your issue? Well, officially, when they start the meetings, they say, the only criteria for membership is a desire to stop drinking. And they will talk about alcohol throughout the meeting. However, I've gone to a bunch of meetings. I've heard a lot from people. A lot of addicts will go to AA meetings, partly because there's so many more of them than any others. So for instance, I checked out one place recently, and looking at their schedule, they had over 20 AA meetings in a week. I mean, you could go to several in a day, right? and they had one heroin anonymous meeting, one cocaine anonymous meeting, and one NA meeting a week. So say your issue's narcotics, right? You're like, oh, good, I get one meeting a week. Maybe that's not enough for you. So join an AA meeting. Most of them will understand if you say I'm an addict. People get picky about it. Find another meeting at that same place, or find another meeting close where they welcome other addicts. Founded in 1935, it's a fellowship of former users. It is definitely a non-professional organization. They do not, no one's professional, no one's running the meeting. People take turns chairing the meeting. They run the whole organization. It's rotating leadership, all of those kinds of things. So this really is a peer-based, have to have this issue to be running this program and dealing with this program. And they have sponsors, people who will help show you the ropes. There's something called the Big Book of AA. That's the original text. That's for Alcoholics Anonymous. If you want to run an AA meeting in your pod, we do have copies of the AA Big Book in the library. You can kite those. You're allowed to have them down in the pod, and you are allowed right now you'd have to follow all the restrictions on social distancing and mask wearing, etc. But it has been said that you can, if you've run AA meetings on the outside, or you've been in an AA meeting and you all want to run yours right now, since we don't have AA coming in, that would be a possibility. Now, the other groups all have their own kind of big book. So Narcotics Anonymous, again, available. I have one to check out. Sometimes there's one available in the library. I don't know if you can still kite that. I will find out when I get back. So each group has its own kind of big book that it uses as its major text, which tells the 12 steps, and then it has a bunch of stories related to that particular addiction. This is a program based on working the 12 steps of recovery. Now I'm going to go through the steps again, just because this is such a prevalent program that I think it helps if you know what it's about before you walk in the doors, because that a lot of times is scary for people. When my brother first joined AA, I had been through it with my best friend. You guys know she's been sober for 31 years. He's got 14 years now. But I said, I'd given him the information before, and he was going to try it. Well, then finally, when he had this one night, when he called me and I spent the night down at his house, and next day I said, okay, we're going to this AA meeting. And he said, no, I'll go another time. And I said, no, we can go today. And he said, no, because I don't know what happens there. And, but I'll figure it out another time. And I'm like, you don't want to go with me. You're going to figure out, nope, you called my butt down here in the middle of the night. We're going. And, he was surprised at how welcome he felt, right? And some groups, honestly, will be welcoming, and some groups will be like a little clique in junior high. So one of the things with any of the groups I'm going to talk about, don't use one meeting as a way to say yes or no. And that's true whether you go to a new social group, a new church, a new school, whatever. Don't use one time as your thing. I would say go at least, I used to tell kids 5 to 8 times. They had to come to group to really get a feel for it. So if you're going to go to AA meetings, go to the same meeting a couple times, but also go to other meetings, because different meetings have different flavors. And you might not mesh well with one meeting, but you might mesh well with another meeting. Something I've noticed is like sometimes they have what they call young people's meetings, right? Where, the younger adults want to hang out with each other. They're like, I don't want to be with some guy, this group of old guys who are 70, right? And they've had sobriety for 50 years or something. And yeah, it's great to hear their stories sometimes. We have nothing in common. We're dealing with, how do I deal with my friends, going out with my friends, and how do I deal with this and that? So try different groups out. 12 steps. First, we admitted we were powerless over our addiction. I'm going to use a generic version, that our lives had become unmanageable. This step is about admitting what you don't control. So giving up false control in order to empower your genuine self, right? 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Here's a problem a lot of people have with 12-step groups. They tell you flat out they are a spiritual program. Now, spiritual, not religious. So you don't have to belong to any religion. They even have a chapter in their book for atheists and agnostics. Russell Brand in his book talks about how he was taught the 12 steps by an avowed atheist, right? So you don't necessarily have to believe in God. It has to be some power greater than yourself. So it could be nature. It could be that the group itself all those people put together, is bigger than you. It's just got to be a power that's not you. You don't get to be the higher power, the ultimate authority on everything. But if that spirituality thing is going to trip you up, we're going to get to a couple others that are what we call secular, right? There's the spiritual or the religious, and then there's the secular, the non-religious. But the second step came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. In any treatment, you're going to have this idea, though, of there's a bigger purpose here, right? I can't just say, I'm going to stop using. That's never a big enough goal, really. Abstinence will get you so far. Not using will be, okay, that's what you don't want. But then you have to tie into something bigger. What do I want? What do I want for my life, my dreams, my goals, right? All those kinds of things. So bigger purpose. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. Again, that's the part that trips some people up. But again, some atheists and agnostics have been very successful in AA. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. This goes along with my old saying, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. So in AA, first you're going to say, wow, I can't deal with this addiction on my own. I am not going to cure this addiction just by thinking my way out of it, because I've tried, right? I'm going to admit that I need some help here, and I'm going to reach out for help. And I'm going to realize that there's a bigger deal working here. I have a bigger purpose than this. Now I'm going to actually have to say, what have I done? What part is my part? What are my patterns, and what do I need to do? What do I need to change? And I would say you can't let go of something you never had. I mean, I can't give away $10 million because I don't have $10 million. I'd have to have it first. So I can't get rid of my old patterns if first I don't actually own them and hold them and say, yep, these are my patterns. This is what I've done. So that's what that 4th step is really own up to what you've done. 5th step, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. This step really helps to deal with that shame that comes with addiction, right? And shame, remember, shame says I am bad, where guilt says I've done bad. It helps you kind of relieve the shame by knowing I'm not alone in this. Because that human connection, realizing where we have that human commonality, that's part of the healing process. We've all done things that we need to change. And by doing that, and then you can actually take appropriate guilt. You can say, here's what I am guilty for. These are the behaviors, because guilt says I did wrong. Shame says I am bad. So we get to heal the shame because you're at your core good. And we get to say, oh, how can I repair, heal, do some kind of restitution for the guilt? Okay. So step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. That just implies this willingness that's necessary in treatment. I have to be willing to make changes, okay? 7, humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. And that also, can help us in that forgiveness process, letting go of the urge to punish. So that can be letting go of the urge to punish others, but also at some point it becomes a self-forgiveness. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. This is about restoration, repair, and healing, and this is what alleviates guilt. This is where you're going to make repairs for what you've done. Clean up your past. Clean up your past. So it's not trashing your here and now, right? This is like Hoarders. You ever seen that show, Hoarders? It's like, oh my God, it's going to take a lot to get this all cleaned up, but let's really get it cleaned out. Let's get our house cleaned out so we can start fresh. Step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except to do so when injure them or others. This is about that healing and restoration. The best apology is changed behavior. So you're actually going to have to go and do it, and not just the thought, oh, I thought of doing something for them. Oh, I feel really bad about it. That's good enough, right? No, you actually make amends where you can. Now, if they've said they never want to see you, you're not going to insist on barging in their lives. If they're dead, you might have to write a letter and burn it. You might have to do a living amend. Well, the things I did to them, the amount of deceit and all that I did to them, I'm going to live my life in a way that no longer does that. Step 10, this is what I call the real-time step. once you've cleaned up the past, steps 1 through 9, once you've cleaned up the past, step 10 is continued to take personal inventory, look at my own behavior, my own patterns, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So now I'm going to be cleaning up my stuff in real time, so I won't get to the hoarders situation again, right? 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood God, praying only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. Again, prayer and meditation. That meditation, that's the mindfulness. So if we're thinking of it in that way, really focusing on, hey, what's my bigger purpose here? And step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. This is about human beings. What's the word? Are hardwired for connection. This says, this is also my chance to give back, right? And that is part of most healing programs as well, that your bigger purpose will involve what am I not just getting, not just what's in it for me, but what am I giving? So we went through the 12 steps, like I said, just because those are, AA is so popular and people run across it. You can also do a religious version of AA called Celebrate Recovery. That is definitely the biggest, most accessible of the non-professional programs. And some treatment programs like Hazelden out of Minnesota actually base their stuff on the 12 steps. Now, we're going to cover several others though, and these are ones you may not have heard, so I'm going to really go through my list so I make sure I cover them correctly. And like I said, some of them have meetings in our area, some of them don't, some of them have phone meetings, and I'm guessing, I need to check it out, but I'm guessing with this whole COVID-19, you might actually see these become more popular because with the upswing in Zoom, these could really be helped by a digital thing where it's like, well, maybe we only have 200 people in the whole metro area who want to do this, but we might have 2,000 people across the country. Oh, well, we can pull some meetings out of that, right? So the first one is called SMART Recovery, S-M-A-R-T, which stands for Smart Management and Recovery Training. It was founded in 1994 as a mental health and education program. It is free. It has not been widely available, maybe more so now. These are mutual support meetings focused on ideas and techniques to change your life from one that is destructive, including self-destructive, and unhappy, to one that is constructive and satisfying. Now, here's where this comes in. It focuses on learning scientifically validated methods to develop a more positive lifestyle and learn coping skills. So it kind of says, hey, we get it that we often develop addictions as a way of coping. And we want methods of coping that can replace our old faulty methods, our distorted methods, our dysfunctional methods. We want new methods. And we're going to pick the ones that are scientifically based. It does do a lot of CBT type exercises. And when you get out, you can look up some of those. I will also have some handouts. I've definitely pulled some from each of these programs. So if you want to look at, hey, what kinds of things do they do? But a lot of CBT type exercises. Key areas of change, they have 4. The first one is you need to build and maintain your motivation to change. Motivation's a toughie. Your motivation will not stay constant. You might be heavily motivated when your court date's coming up, but less motivated once court's over, right? So this is about building and maintaining that motivation to change. And you need to build the structure around that because, see, structure can keep you going when inspiration and motivation have left the building. 2, coping with how you cope with urges to use. 3, managing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in an effective way without addictive behaviors. And 4, living a balanced, positive, and healthy life. And again, they focus not just on the abstinence, which is part of their program, but it's not enough to say what you're not going to do. It's like, how am I building toward what I do want? So that's called SMART Recovery. SOS is Secular Organizations for Sobriety. Secular means non-religious. It used to be called Save Ourselves, SOS. It was founded in 1985, so it's been around a little longer. A self-empowerment approach to recovery is how they describe themselves. And they do say abstinence is priority 1, no matter what. That's their quote, priority 1, no matter what. And in this one, they really say, we're going to credit you alone with having to achieve and maintain your sobriety. It's your sobriety. However, life does not have to be faced alone. So it's like, hey, ultimately it's your responsibility. It's not some higher power, and it's not us. And at the same time, we are meant to be connected. So we have groups where we can get support, exchange ideas, challenge each other's distorted thinking, all that kind of stuff. Especially, and this is where it can also, again, notice there's always this component of giving back and helping other people. In a group, you could see, hey, this person's done it. That might be a good role model for me. They respect recovery in any form. And they're not in competition with any other program. Some people are actually involved in this group and other groups. They're like, hey, if you want to be involved in more than one treatment, we're not saying ours is the only way. You can have ours to add to your other things. Supports healthy skepticism and encourages use of scientific method to understand alcoholism. So like, hey, you got questions about this? Ask questions, be skeptical, really, investigate these things. And again, anonymity is emphasized in their groups. In fact, most of these, it's like, this is your issue, and it's like, people don't deserve to be telling your story. So anonymity really is part of these. Life Ring Secular Recovery. This one does have meetings in the Denver area. Not a lot, but it does have some, including I think it's still Sunday nights at West Pines. It was founded in 1997 as an outgrowth of SOS, the one we just talked about. In this, people share practical experiences and sobriety support. So again, that mutual aid. And their quote is, there are as many ways to live free of drugs and alcohol as there are stories of successful, sober people. Sounds a lot like their many paths to recovery, right? Many members attend other types or treatment or support groups in addition to Life Ring. So again, it doesn't have to be exclusive. They're not saying my way or the highway. What they want to do, this one really focuses on strengthening your sober self, right? Strengthening that sober self while weakening that addict self. So they will have you looking at, is that your addictive self, talking, or is that your sober self talking? And the groups really want to focus on having sober selves interact with each other. My guess is that some of you can look around your pods and you can see where sometimes it's not our sober selves interacting with each other. Those addict selves get on a roll and they start telling war stories, right? And they start, what about the time, right? All of that. So their groups really do say, hey, we want you to show up. We want you to learn how to be your sober self and how to interact with other sober selves. They have what they call their 3S philosophy, which stands for sobriety, secularity, and self-help. So sobriety is abstinence. Their motto, we do not drink or use no matter what. Death in the family, we don't drink or use. Lost your job, don't drink or use. COVID-19 hits, don't drink or use. So sobriety. Secularity, each person has his or her own faith, religion, etc. Life Ring supports recovery methods that rely on human efforts rather than divine intervention. So again, this is an alternative for people who are bugged by the spiritual aspect, although like they said, if you're in Life Ring, you could also be in a spiritually based program. They're just saying, hey, our program doesn't deal with that issue. We think that humans can help themselves and help each other. The third S is the third F, I can't even talk. The third S is self-help. And the key to recovery is in the individual's own motivation and effort. Groups are to reinforce the individual's striving and to provide support. And in the groups, you also develop your personal recovery plan, right? So, an option. Now, the last one, and I don't want all the guys just to tune out because it's only for women, because I want you to hear some of the ideas at least. Women for Sobriety, WFS. And actually, someone had, one of the women in group had requested materials, and they said, hey, as long as we get information on a letterhead from, your your correctional facility will send stuff in. And so I wrote a letter on the letterhead, and I don't know that we ever got that. I never heard back from her whether she was delivered those materials. So maybe I will make that a project for this week to write to them so we can get some materials for the jail on this. But Women for Sobriety was founded in 1975, and it was founded by a sociologist who said, I think for women sometimes this idea of we admitted we were powerless is not helpful because women were already feeling powerless. So she said that guilt, depression, and low or no self-esteem were common problems women experienced for which addictions had become the primary coping mechanisms. So that's where, guys, I didn't want you to tune out because still there's some things like, oh, maybe my addiction started as a solution. It started as a way to cope, right? With things like low self-esteem, depression, guilt. Because then what would our next question be? Oh, how do I help heal those things while I'm also dealing with, not using, so that I'm not tempted to use and I can create a better life? Because remember, if those things created problems in the first place, and then you tried to use substances or addictions to cope with them, and you're like, well, I'll take the addictions away. If you never deal with these things, you're still miserable. We don't want you we don't want you abstinent, not using, and miserable. We want you not using and achieving your dreams, right? And that doesn't mean that you're not going to have sad moments, but it's like, life. We want you to have your life. So in Women for Sobriety, they say women must address their real needs: self-worth, self-value, and self-efficacy to achieve sobriety. That sounds like the men too. But in groups, sometimes it helps to have women in groups, and especially there has been a situation where sometimes groups tend to prey on vulnerable women, so they have to watch that. And A's really tried to take an active part in making sure people don't do 13th stepping anymore. In groups, women gain support as they learn to identify and address the problems related to their addiction and learn new ways of approaching and solving problems. Skills building. And the program at Women for Sobriety is based on 13 acceptance statements, and the goal is to internalize and use these acceptance statements to achieve a new way of thinking and a new way of life. And what you would do is you take one of these acceptance statements and you would read it in the morning and you would try to incorporate it throughout your day, and then you would review it at night. So I'm just going to go through one. Like the first acceptance statement would be, I have a life-threatening problem that once had me. And then you would say, I now take charge of my life and my well-being. I accept the responsibility. So then you would go through your day. Something would come up and you'd start to feel like a victim, and you'd say, hey, I take charge of my life and my well-being. I accept my responsibility. So you'd really work on that one throughout the day. And then at night you'd review how well you did on that. Does that make sense? And a quote, we used substances to cover pain, emotional pain. When we remove the substances, we must then learn a way to remove the emotional pain, which requires a new way of thinking about life. And again, the reason I didn't want the guys to tune out was I think that's a great concept, right? Substances and addictions do get used to cover pain. And you can't just get rid of the substance. You got to have a new way to deal with all of that and to heal all of that so you can get on with your life. They talk about 6 levels of recovery: acceptance, leading to discarding negative thoughts and practice new ways of seeing things and problem solving; leading to creating and practicing a new self-image; leading to using new attitudes to enforce new behavior patterns; leading to improving relationships as a result of our new feelings about self; leading to recognizing life's priorities, emotional and spiritual growth, and self-responsibility. So these things grow. I accept things are happening. I get rid of my negative thoughts. I practice new ways of seeing things. I practice problem solving. I figure out who I really am. I get rid of my false self and I get in touch with my core self. And I'm going to use my new attitudes to reinforce new behavior patterns, the ones I want. When I do that, when I'm doing better patterns, I get better relationships in my life, and I'm working things out in relationships. And then a person connected with people, with dreams, with goals, with purpose, right? now I can take responsibility and have the emotional and spiritual growth that I'm entitled to. So, and again, Women for Sobriety does have some local meetings. They will send literature to people. Hopefully we'll get some for the jail. Like I said, I have handouts on all these things that you can request when I get back in the building. And we're going to do some more written stuff when I get back, because that's going to be one of our primary ways of kind of bridging that gap of not being able to have 2 classes a week for everybody. So I hope this has been helpful in identifying both some of the professional treatments you might get on the outside and some of the non-professional treatments, because no matter what, support is critical. If you think I'm just going to do this all on my own, you're setting yourself up for a fall. Humans need connection. We need autonomy, yes, and we need connection. So don't go this road alone. Have a good one, and I hope to see you soon.